Okay. All right. Just before we start this episode, I want to apologize. I've had a cold for a week, and so that's why my voice sounds like this. I'll try not to cough into the mic as much as possible.
Was I supposed to give you words of encouragement?
No. Emily, I don't look to you for those types of things.
Thanks.
I'm just kidding. I was joking around with somebody yesterday, and I was like, the kind of affection that my best friend and I give each other is if one of us is really upset, we just go out and just tap their shoulder and just be like, there, it's okay. You're okay. The idea of hugging each other is just never going to happen. Why are we so strange? I'm like, we love each other. If you ever give me a hug, I'd be like, are you okay? Have you been taken hostage or something?
Never know. It might happen.
Never know. Hi, and welcome to the next episode of OTTB on Tap.
And I'm Emily.
I'm Niamh.
Hey, Niamh, what's on tap today?
Today we're putting Emily in the hot seat, and we're going to grill her about her first experience at the Retired Racehorse Project Makeover, which happened to be the inaugural event that took place actually on the racetrack at Pimlico in Baltimore.
Oh boy,
Good job.
This is going back to 2013 when the RRP was actually known as the RRTP, or Retired Racehorse Training Project. So a little bit different. They've done a huge rebranding, as you can see, by taking out one word and one letter. But yeah, it was funny how back then it had a slightly different name, but I think the same core principles and a really great event. But before we get started, please make sure to check out our website, www.ottbontap.com, to sign up for our newsletter and follow us on Facebook and Instagram so you'll be the first to know about bonus content, upcoming episodes, and more. And you never know, we've been having some sneaky little giveaways. We were so happy that Fairhill Saddlery sponsored us with a $100 gift card at the Fairhill Thoroughbred show a couple weeks ago. We also recently had a Facebook and Instagram contest for a Smart Pack gift card. So check us out online.
So let's take us back in the Wayback Machine to 2013 and what was going on in your life during that.
Let's see. I think at the last episode that we talked about my riding career, I had just taken my horse, Alexander, off-track thoroughbred. Jockey club name was Smoky Fire. And we had completed the Rolex Kentucky 3-day event in 1999, not to age myself or anything, at the tender age of 19 for me. And fast forward to 2003, I ended up actually taking a break from riding, ended up selling my horse. I moved to Philly, went back to school for graphic design, and literally did not ride once, or other than maybe like once a year for several years.
And then you got lured back into riding and thoroughbreds all at once.
I don't know exactly like what moment triggered it. I think it was a slow burn of, there was this website called Canter, which is still around. And I was like, oh, I can go late at night and peruse all of these thoroughbreds and look at them all and see pictures of them and descriptions. And lo and behold, I could even go to the racetrack and see these horses and buy them. But it was all kind of a pipe dream. And I had a really good friend that was very encouraging. And she and I decided to buy an off-track thoroughbred with this great idea that we were going to retrain and resell it for profit, which did not happen.
LOL.
Big learning curve. Really lovely horse, though. Luckily, he was a saint. He was still a colt when we bought him, got him gelded, and he was one of those that just went from being like a ball of energy to the quietest puppy dog type of horse, except for when Niamh rode him and he tried to buck her off, but one and only time that happened. His name was Charlie, really sweet horse. But funny story, while I was looking for a horse to buy and went to Penn National, and I looked at probably, 12 or 15 horses in a day, And I was at this barn that wasn't on the track. It was just down the road. And the trainer, I went to see a different horse. And the trainer said, oh, wait, I have one that I have to run one more time, which if you've ever gone to the track to look at horses, the one more time speech, and I think they even call it the one more time syndrome, but everybody always wants to run the horse one more time. So I basically was like, okay, whatever, like, pull him out. I had seen a bunch of club-footed, some nice horses and some not great horses. Let's put it that way. I just remember one had this very extreme club foot that was like, ooh, I don't even know how that works. And this horse walked out of the stall. His jockey club name was Stonecrest. And I about fell on the floor. He was probably 16'2", bay. He had these 4 little white anklet socks. And he moved like, I don't know, just spectacular. And so, of course, that's all I could think about. I was like, I need this horse. But he wasn't for sale. So I left and bought Charlie as a resale project, the chestnut. And then probably 2 or 3 weeks after the sale of Charlie was finalized, trainer calls me up. And he's, yep, he's available. And I was like, of course. So I ended up with 2 off-track thoroughbreds after not riding for several to many years. I lived in Philadelphia. I was bartending and working as a graphic designer. And I was trying to commute out of the city to ride them at the same time. And actually, Niamh and you, that's around the time that you and I met, I think.
Yeah, and I just wanted to come back to a comment that you made about the one more time syndrome. I think what Emily is referencing there is it's a catch-all for the horse running one more time, but really it's probably the most risky thing that you can do with a horse in that position, because there's just so many things that can go wrong. And a lot of times they're being run one more time because the trainer thinks they can maybe recover some money from the horse or maybe make back a little bit of money. The danger there is that the one more time often means the horse might have an injury at the track or take the risk that the horse is going to get claimed away. So when you hear a trainer say that when you're interested in a horse, there's a lot of risk there. It's like being at a craps table and hoping that you don't get snake eyes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times you figure, let's also take this back that this is 2010. So this is a good long time ago. I know that a lot of good work has been done against this type of attitude of let's just run them one more time. It still happens, but a lot of times you weren't going to hear from that trainer or you weren't going to get that horse. You knew leaving that it just wasn't going to happen. So the fact that I ended up actually getting the horse was a miracle.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was around that time that Emily and I met, and she had just gotten these 2 horses. And it's really funny to think back about that time. Obviously, we've been friends for such a long time now, but I remember you being about your experience and your ability to bring these horses along. And I understand that when you've taken a break, I took a really long break from riding as well, you doubt any sort of skill or feel that you might have. But I think you said something along the lines of, yeah, I'm just trying to remember how to post without posting with my hands. And this is coming on the heels of her telling me her riding resume. And I was like, oh, I don't think I can ever ride in front of this person.
Newsflash, I think I still post with my hands, so don't judge.
That's okay. I can't feel for my diagonals. It's totally fine. Anyway, but this was not long after this was when you started being a working student, right?
Yeah, so I was boarding the horses. I think at this point, so we had moved Charlie onto a new home. He had been sold. And so I just had my own horse, Jack, at that point, and I was sitting in traffic on 76. And if you know anything about Philadelphia and trying to board a horse when you live in Philly, 76, or if you commute into Philly, 76 is just a nightmare. Like, it could take you 15 minutes or it could take you 3 hours. Really.
Yeah. That's not an exaggeration.
No rhyme or reason. I was sitting on traffic, and by sitting in traffic, it was like literally a parking lot. Like, my car was probably parked. I was scrolling online at horse ads because what else do you do? And I saw an ad that at the time, and still notable reseller, Pat Dale, had posted looking for a working student. She was looking for somebody to come to her farm, live there, and you would get training and instruction, and you would get to ride all of her off-track thoroughbreds, get to compete some of them, prepare them for sale. I'd seen Pat's ads online, and I knew that she had a really good eye for a horse. And she also presented them very well in terms of photography. And I think
her business model was like the type that a lot of resellers, I think, started to formulate their business models after in years to come. I think she set a high bar for confirmation photos, free jump photos, riding videos, and all that
absolutely.
kind of stuff.
It's a good succinct way to put it. So I think I sent her an email, and then I texted Niamh, and I was like, guess what I did? And she goes, did you apply for that job? And I was like, how did you know? So also what's crazy is I was like in my early 30s. I was living in Philadelphia. I had a life. I had a dog. I had a boyfriend. I had 4 jobs. And I applied for this job to go live in Maryland on a farm in the middle of nowhere. And everybody I knew thought I was totally nuts, like totally insane. Not my family, but my friends who knew me from working as a bartender in Philly or at my design job or just from around town and didn't even maybe know. They like, oh yeah, I think she rides or she used to ride or whatever. But suddenly it was like, what, you're moving to Maryland to live on a farm? What are you even talking about? But the thing was, I was so frustrated I'd gone from being immersed in riding growing up and always worked at farms and grew up riding a ton of different horses. And then when I worked professionally riding, I rode a ton of horses every day. And when you just have one and you're riding it 3 or 4 times a week, because that's all your schedule can allow, it's so hard to feel progress. And I just was not progressing, and it was very frustrating to me. And I knew the way to get that back was to ride a lot of horses and sit on a lot of different horses. So that was part of the main reason that I did it, was to just get my feel back. But also I really wanted to learn from Pat and learn how she picked horses out, how she made contacts, how she marketed them, all of that good stuff.
Yeah. And I think the only way to do that is to fully immerse yourself in that process. And that's essentially what I ended up doing years later for you. I will never forget, though, when we're getting a little off track here, but I'll never forget you had a big night the night before you started working for Pat. And then the next day you texted me, I have to ride with Jimmy Wofford.
Yeah, it was my last night. It was my last night of bartending the night before. And I had to ride with Jimmy Wofford in the morning, like down, I can't remember if the farm was in Oxford, PA, or maybe down in Maryland. So I was up until, who knows, 3 or 4 in the morning. And then I probably had like an 8 a.m. ride time. And I had never even seen this horse before. And I had trained with Jimmy, but it had been, I don't know, it seemed like forever. I guess a decade, probably, close to that.
Yeah.
And I woke up and I was driving there. I was like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. What am I doing?
Baptism by fire.
Yeah, actually the horse was lovely. It all worked out. Probably better that I was completely exhausted and half asleep. So I couldn't actually get nervous. Yeah. But yeah, those are the things you do when you're not old yet. See, if you're in your early 30s, you're not old yet.
Yeah, you still got it. So then fast forward as to what happened after you left Pat's.
Yeah, so I had gained 2 horses in the time that I worked for Pat. So I had 3. And funny how that happens, isn't it? So I still had Jack, although I decided I wanted to sell him because he made it clear that being ridden in wide open spaces like a cross-country course probably was not his ideal profession, and he was a lovely mover and jumper. So I decided to sell him as either a show hunter or a show jumper or something in that realm, but I still had him. And I bought a horse from Pat. I think I took to an event. He'd never cross-country schooled or something, or I had never cross-country schooled him, that's for sure. And he was awesome, jumped right around and was super perfect. Bought him and then also acquired Riley, which is the horse that Niamh ended up buying from me. But I found a barn to rent with another friend in Cochranville, PA. And we moved there. Again, I was commuting then. At that point, I'd moved back to Philly. So I was commuting out every day over an hour each way, sometimes just to dump grain.
Yeah, that was rough because we were all doing some shifts then, and it could be really tricky, especially in the winter with the two of us living in Philly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like winters were just like laughing at us. They were like,
they were brutal that year. Oh my God, I know. Yeah, we would sometimes have to carve like these tunnels to the turnout fields with just walls of snow. Since we've been out of running a barn together, we have not had a snow. We haven't had an ice storm like that.
Hey,
or
knock
anything.
on wood.
It's wild.
Stop that.
That's why we board our horses now. So how did you get involved in knowing about the first rendition of the Retired Racehorse Training Project?
That's a great question.
Wasn't there like an affiliation with Stuart Pittman at the time?
They had run a version of it, a very pared down version at the Pennsylvania National Horse Show. It was in Harrisburg.
Oh, yeah.
I think they had found owners. I think there were 3 or 4 thoroughbreds, and then they had 3 or 4 riders or trainers that trained them. And it was for a much shorter period of time. I think it was maybe 30 to 60 days or something. And then they came and did an exposition in Harrisburg. And Pat had actually been involved in that. I think her mare won, I'm pretty sure, that year.
Oh, yeah, with the Brazilian wedding. Yeah.
So I'd heard about that. So I knew what the Retired Racehorse Training Project was. And then I somehow got wind of, I'm sure through social media, an article or whatnot, that they were going to have this big makeover. And it was a much different format than it is now, in that it wasn't a competition. It was a showcase of what you could do in terms of training your horse over a set period of time in your chosen discipline, and then go and show that off to everybody. But there was an application process. I know that they got several hundred applications. They chose 26 trainers that were accepted for this showcase event. And you had to fill out an application, give your background, your competition record. Pretty sure they asked for either photos or videos or whatever you had, so that they could make sure that you were legit. And I was one of the people selected. So that was really incredible. And it is pretty wild when you think that it went from 26 trainers at that time. And at the Pimlico Racecourse in Baltimore, and now it's a huge event with over 500 trainers every year. At the Kentucky Horse Park. Yeah, so it's a totally different venue. Yeah. But we actually had to ride on the racetrack,
which was very cool. Pimlico is such a unique racetrack that you get there, it feels a little bit like hallowed ground in the sense that you can, I don't know, I think because it's a part of the Triple Crown, it just has there's like a deep bedded like history.
Yeah, it's almost feeling. It's a cross between being a little haunted feeling.
Yeah.
And because it's not occupied that much. / like glamorous. I don't know. It's a hard thing to describe, but yeah, I was really honored / terrified. But I just set out on my own. I was trying to, make a name for myself now as buying thoroughbreds, retraining them and selling them. So really for me, it was a perfect vehicle for that. And also part of the requirements were that you had to write blog articles and submit them that would get uploaded onto the RRTP website, and videos and things like that, and check-ins along the way. So people could actually follow you and subscribe to you. And it was a really great kind of networking experience, and still is, just on a much larger scale.
Yeah. And I do remember specifically the horse that you selected and bought for the makeover, which was a horse named Yorkshire Lad.
Yes. And I would have bought him anyway, but when I purchased him, I had not yet been selected. Obviously, I was hopeful. And he was a really stunning dark bay think it was a 3-year-old gelding, and through some local connections. And unfortunately, the same day that I got accepted to the makeover, we had to put him down due to complications from being gelded. The worst day plus kind of the best day at the same time. It was really tough.
Yeah. And do you have a picture of him still, do you think? Yeah. We'll have to post a picture because he was probably one of the nicest horses, I think, conformationally, and just had that really special it quality about him. He knew he was special. So that was pretty devastating. And then you didn't have a ton of time to, because was the makeover like a 90-day? It was like a 90-day training period, or
I think it was a little bit
that?
longer, but I think I might have had 90 days. Oh. It wasn't as long as it is now. I want to say that it took place the first weekend in October, and I don't think I found my horse until maybe the beginning of June. Something like that. Almost 4 months, something like that.
Yeah. Which is a very truncated time period when you consider a lot of the stuff that you have to deal with when the horse first comes home off the track, and some of the letdown experiences that they're going to go through, whether that's feet or mental health or body, or just needing a little time to just chill out.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And that's the thing that now I think it's the new format, I think, suits that process a lot better, because it does allow for a lot more time. And maybe now where participants are able to get horses that might need a little time for a mild injury or a little time for a hoof to grow out or things like that, where I think that really puts the thoroughbred first in the timeline for sure.
Yeah, I think the other thing I will say, though, is since it wasn't a competition, it was truly about, let's say that your horse did have major hoof issues, you could talk about that and, make that part of your journey. And not that now it's not, but at the end of the day, it wasn't like I had to have a horse going beginner novice or jumping a 2'6" course or doing a certain level of dressage. So it was very much about the process from start to finish and where you were, because there was no requirement of what you had to show when you went to the track, but everybody wanted to show the best that they could. So
for sure. Yeah. Then let's talk about how you acquired your RRP.
Yes.
Mount.
So we talked about her in a previous episode, which was our 4 of our favorite OTTBs, Volume 1. And so I think we talked a little bit about how I found her, but I found her on Facebook. Good old Facebook. I think I saw a random, I don't know, on whatever the horse selling groups were back then. I think I saw a free video of her either trotting in this arena or cantering, and she just went and jumped the jump all on her own. It wasn't like anybody was asking her to, or there were poles set up or anything. She was just trotting or cantering around and jumped this jump. And I was like, wow, that looks like a really pretty, really cool horse. And I don't think they posted much information about her. And I'm sure I contacted them and asked for her name and all of her information. Her name was Victory Money. And she's this gorgeous blood bay with white. And I made an appointment to go take a look at her. I probably would have just bought her sight unseen, but at that point, especially because I was in a rush and I didn't want to miss out on her, but they were open to me coming to take a look at her.
Yeah, and she is by a very sought after sire.
Love of Money.
Sire line, which is Love of Money, who is by Not for Love, which about 10 years ago, there were a lot of those horses out and about, and just a really nice sport horse pedigree. They tend to be athletic, good movers. You don't see them as often anymore, but if you do, definitely snap them up. I don't know much about the dam line. She's out of Carla's Victory, who is by Medieval Victory, but it looks like kind of older breeding lines there. And she made 14 starts and I think hit the board a couple times. But yeah,
she does notably have Fabiano on her bottom line, which tends to be, in my experience, a good moving horse as well. So that would be my kind of standout if I'm looking there.
Yeah. I do remember you sending me a picture of her in the cross ties at the barn where you met her. And I was like, oh, she's really cute.
Yeah. And if I recall correctly, I think they'd sat on her maybe once or twice. And there was like this kid riding her around with, I don't even know if how do I describe this? Didn't look like the kid knew much about riding. And the mare was just cantering along in this spectacular, what I like to call like a clockwork canter. Like she could just canter and canter for days in this perfect balance and almost like slow motion. And I think they were like, don't you want to get on her? And I was like, do I have to? Like,
right. I've seen enough.
But I did get on her. And I was like, yep, this is what I thought. She was very chill. I really liked her temperament. I loved her conformation. We'll post a conformation photo of her. Typical big shoulder, nice proportions, very strong, sloping hind end.
Yeah, she's got one of the nicest hind legs.
Beautiful hind leg. Just a really lovely horse.
And diagonal socks.
Yes. I'm a sucker for the diagonal socks because then they don't make the horse look uneven. Pro tip.
Yeah, we should talk about this at some point when you're looking at horses in terms of their markings, because a lot of these things you don't realize actually create optical illusions for judges or vets, for example. And I know that everybody is attracted to chrome, but it can actually cause you some problems. For example, if you have a horse that has a blaze that starts in the center and then deviates and goes off to one side, it can be tricky because it can make them look like their head is cocked a little bit when in fact their head is not cocked. And the same thing with the socks and stuff like that. They can create an optical illusion that the horse is a little uneven.
Yeah, like your eye gets very drawn to the white. So it's hard to know if it's the horse has one white leg and your eye is drawn to that. Is it favoring that leg or is it not? So you have to learn how to look past it. But if they have diagonal socks, you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, it's mesmerizing then. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about bringing her home and how she was to transition, because she had been off the track for a little bit when
I didn't buy her directly from the backside of the track. So to be honest, I can't remember how long she'd been off the track, but it wasn't terribly long. But I would say she probably didn't have racing plates on. So she had regular shoes on and she'd been ridden. There was no actual like training that she'd been done, but I knew you could get on her. She had a really great temperament and those kind of big obstacles had been crossed at least. So I knew she had a willing temperament and she wasn't going to kill me when I swung my leg over, which
I think like you were saying about commuting from Philadelphia out to Cochranville. I think ideally you want a horse that doesn't necessarily need to be ridden 7 days a week, because while you're running a barn and trying to do everything else, it's nice to have a horse that you can get on and go and teach it a little bit every day, and it's not going to try to kill you every day. So I mean that very hyperbolically. I mean that with some of them right off the track, they need that constant just interaction. And a lot of those, like just a mounting block could be a major milestone for a horse that just, it's very nice when they've been broke really nicely at the track. They had good connections and they're just a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, since we did touch on feet a little bit, her feet did end up being, I think, a little bit problematic. She had one white foot, front foot, what isn't always the worst thing, but in comparison to her black foot, it was also a bit more upright and her angles were growing out differently. And she had that very pronounced kind of groove the way once her angles started to change and that foot decided it was going to be more upright now instead of the long, low heel. And I think once all that old hoof was growing out, we did have some issues with that. So I think Magic Cushion was our friend, as was probably good relationship with the farrier.
Yeah, we had a great farrier at the time too, who took a lot of time and energy, honestly, just trying to figure out the best way to create a hoof for the future, not for the moment. And I learned so much from him over the years that we used him. And I also just wanted to say that I know we're going to get to this in a minute, but we moved a fair amount during the time that you had her. And I don't think people necessarily understand the impact that change of environment has on the feet. And that can come from their nutrition, their bedding, their turnout situation, the minerals in the soil. There's just a lot of elements. And so I think that when horses move from barn to barn, while on the surface, a lot of things seem the same in terms of how many hours of turnout they get and things like that, that there are all of these small pieces that ultimately will affect the foot. And you can always sort of go to the foot to tell you what's going on in the horse's environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, not to mention moving them right before you have to go to a big show can always be a little bit hectic, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But as far as her early training, she was straightforward. She was a mare, and I love a good mare. She's very smart. But I do know that she had a bit of sassiness in her in terms of, drilling her wasn't the best idea. I remember also the place that we were at, they had a lot of filler in the jumps and a lot of kind of crazy looking jumps. So I would just make all the jumps as low as I could. And I'd walk her over them. And then she was like, oh, these are no big deal. And she actually became very brave.
Yeah.
Almost a little bit too brave in her later days. But yeah, she I think that really helped ground her and gave her something to think about, and also taught her that walking over weird objects wasn't a scary thing. I wanted to show her off as a dressage and event prospect. That part was important, as was maybe getting her out to some competitions, some events, some cross-country schoolings and things like that.
Yeah, and so you were able to cross-country school her a bit and also take her to some small events.
Yeah, we went, I want to say our first cross-country schooling, we went to Carousel Park, which is in Delaware.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a picture of her somewhere where literally we're just parked. It was like a super hot day. And I think we went with our friend Hillary.
Yeah, I think she was there.
And
yeah, because my horse was like dealing with some foot issues, so we could only really walk around. And so we were just like the buddy system. Yeah, of course. I'm like, well, I'd love to cross country school, but here we are.
We went with our friends Hillary and Rachel, and I feel like one or the other of them was on a little bit of a spicier horse. But I have this picture of me and her. I'm just sitting on her in the shade, and she's just standing there with the hoof cocked, like, okay, what's next? Basically, we jumped all the jumps. She went into the water. Yeah. Everything was just no big deal to her. And that was very cool.
And then you got to compete.
Yeah, we did a couple of events in the lead up. There used to be this great little place called Old Hope where was that? Was that in Maryland? I think it was in
Maryland. Yeah. It was just the best venue. It was
awesome for the green horses because they had everything from the littlest log on the ground in an enclosed area. You could walk or trot over 8 logs inside of a big fenced-in area on the really green ones to the next step up, to the next step up. And I think they had a novice and even maybe training level at some point. But it was all unrecognized and just a really lovely atmosphere. So I think that was her first proper little unrecognized event. And then I think we did the event at Carousel too. So we got 2 little starter horse trials in before. And the turnaround time for that was probably like 2.5 months that she went from coming to going to those. And she really took it all in stride, like just a really cool mare.
In terms of what you wanted to show off during your showcase at the makeover, what were you hoping to really highlight in terms of her training and what you had done with her at that point?
Niamh going unscripted. Now I know what it feels like. One thing about her, I wanted to show off what she was good at. And one thing about her that I think was really exceptional, and I'm sure there's different feelings about this, but her canter was so exceptional and so balanced that she had this remarkable, very natural lead change and did not speed up, did not throw her head up, did not care. She would just do this beautiful lead change. So I really wanted to be able to show that off in a deliberate sort of way at the makeover. And I wanted to prepare a little bit of a flat work routine because she was a very beautiful mover. I know I've talked about her canter a lot, but she just had this just awesome, gorgeous, floaty trot. And she was an exceptional jumper. So I wasn't sure really what the format was going to be. I knew that we would have 10 or 15 minutes to basically show off whatever we wanted to, but I didn't know what like the space was going to look like. It was hard to picture doing something on a racetrack. I was like, are they going to put jumps on the racetrack? How exactly does this work? I think we even thought maybe it would be in the infield on the grass.
I was just going to say, oh, surely they're going to have it on the infield because there's not going to be enough room to do it on the track. And we were surprised when we got there.
Yeah. And then probably less than a month before we got there, we had to move the barn we were renting. The farm got sold and we had to find a new place. And we actually ended up at this really cool animal sanctuary, an animal rescue. Actually, it's just down the road from where I live now. It's called La Mancha. And little did we know, they actually have a really fabulous little boarding facility back there and a great ring. But my mares had to live in a field with emus, which they did not care about, but I was terrified of, because I don't know if you've ever run face to face with an emu, but they're freaking huge and they have these huge talons, like big claws, and they're like weird prehistoric things. And sometimes my horses would be over standing by the emus and I'd be like, Can I
want to
just come to me, please? But I don't know. What do you think about the desensitization that they went through being there?
Oh my gosh. There's also like rows of dog kennels. There's literal wild animals all over the place. There's minis.
You'd be riding in the ring and a peacock would just jump up and like perch, and there were guinea hens and all sorts of like birds everywhere. It's like Noah's Ark, like literally like Noah's Ark.
There was also like a resident border collie that used to love to run around the ring that would just chase you around the base of the ring while you were riding. So it was definitely full immersion in chaos. But, you know, the horses that we had there actually did really well. And it was fun being there because our tack lockers were right next to the puppy room. So we could go in and play with the puppies whenever we wanted to.
It was so dangerous. But they do wonderful dog adoptions. I've adopted 2 dogs from them. Super people to work with. Highly recommended.
Yes. But moving there had its downsides as well.
Yeah, our horses were living out. I don't think that they had room in the barn for them. So it was August, September, and we had horses that I think maybe Riley had been living out, but I know that Prima had not been. So she did end up losing a little bit of weight, which I think is probably natural to go from living in a stall and being turned out like 8 hours a day to all of a sudden 24/7 turnout. So probably could have caught that a little earlier, but I ended up changing her feed and putting her on some fat supplements and things like that and experimenting to try to get some weight back on her before the makeover. Nothing terrible. And then also with her living out, and I think that's when her feet started to go through a little bit more of transition also, because when they live out all the time and they're not coming into a stall, especially if they're used to it and it's the summertime, then they're going to be stomping flies. They don't have that kind of soft cushion to give their feet some relief. So another kind of learning curve there about how to care for off-track thoroughbreds in their first year off the track. And then all of a sudden you have to make a big transition. Luckily, a wonderful place to be, but we ended up only staying there, I think 2 or maybe 3 months before we found another barn that we could rent.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we needed to find a place that we could ultimately have clients come and things like that. So it was definitely always going to be temporary, but it was a nice stopover facility.
For sure. It was a good experience, good desensitization.
Now we're going to get into actually going to Pimlico, which if you've never been to Pimlico, the track itself, and actually if you've listened to any of our episodes with Lauren Bond, she grew up right around Pimlico. It's quite frankly in the middle of a neighborhood. There's row homes surrounding it. It's wild. So it's in the middle of a neighborhood, which is wild.
Like a city neighborhood.
In the shed row and city neighborhood. Yeah. And from the shed row, you can see row homes and like corner shops and things like that. But tell us a little bit about getting there, settling her in and things like that, and realizing where you were going to have to be riding and doing your demo.
Yeah, we were stabled in the stakes barn, which was really cool. It was a very nice barn. And we got there, and she was a pro. She shipped great. She settled right in. And my main goal, because we got there in the evening or afternoon, I think we had a day to acclimate. And then the actual showcase took place on the following day. But my main goal of getting there in the afternoon was to get her on the track and just see what was going to happen. Because you don't know.
I don't know if our listeners have ever seen any of those TikTok trends that went around for a while where people would play the, what do they call
I'm
that?
too old for TikTok.
The bugle horn.
There's the name for
they
that.
Would play that. I know there is. I'm gonna feel really stupid now. But anyways,
what is the name of the bugle? We're acting like we don't have Google.
Is it like
something like that? It's call to post. Very good.
Okay. So there used to be a TikTok trend where people would play the call to post bugle sound in the barn with their off the track thoroughbreds, and some of the horses would get real excited about it. And I feel like sometimes you find out how much your off the track thoroughbred is triggered by loudspeakers when you're at an event for the first time, which can be really exciting.
I did not have that experience, but the experience I can tell you about a bugle or a horn is when I was a kid and I went fox hunting with Pony Club for the very first time. I was like a D3 pony clubber on an off-track thoroughbred, and he heard the horn from the master of hounds and took off, and we went very fast. For the whole time.
Too long. Did you pass?
I'm pretty sure not, because in Pony Club they're pretty emphatic about rules and things. Yeah. So I think somehow I didn't. Yes. So I do know about the reaction that they can have. Luckily, that did not happen.
But I do think that there was a lot of concern by many of the participants and maybe some of the spectators of what are these horses going to think when they recognize that they're on the track again? Are they going to think I go for a jog and then I go for a breeze? Or
I was definitely like, all right, we're going to see what happens. Now, I did not ride her out there. I led her out the first time just to see in a halter with a well-fitted chain shank, and she was fine. I led her around. Yeah. She saw everything, probably because she wasn't that great of a racehorse.
And there was also, so we'll show a picture of this because I actually took a bunch of pictures that the Retired Racehorse Project used, but there's a really great picture of the spectator view where you can see how the stands were, how the things were laid out. And there was also a huge Jumbotron on the backside, on the inner rail by the
infield.
By the finish line. Yeah, before the infield. So definitely not your standard setup for doing a demo or anything like that.
But anyway, I walked her out there. Other people were either hand walking or riding. And I think I decided, you know what, I've got daylight. I'm going to tack her up and get on her and take her out there. And I have to say that the little kid in me really wanted to go gallop and go fast, but I did not. We did go for a jog around the track, and holy crap, it's a long way to go all the way around the track at Pimlico. Yeah. It takes a long time. Yeah. It doesn't look like it. And then I was like, okay, we're still trotting. Yep, we're still trotting. Also, the footing's way deeper than I would have thought.
It was very deep, yeah. A funny story about how long that track is, though, because I remember somebody doing one of the Western demos had this little Spitfire of a thoroughbred, and then she just took it for a gallop around the track at Mach 10, and the announcer,
which was Stewart, wasn't it? I think it was Stewart.
Yeah, she's going for a gallop. Well, she's really going. I don't know if she means to be going that fast, and she flew around, and then she came back and was doing her little thing. But yeah, it was pretty wild.
Yeah. Oh, it was interesting, and we haven't really talked about the other competitors. I don't know. Did you find a competitor list?
I didn't find a competitor list, but I did want to talk about how when I showed up the day of the demo to come hang out with you, I'll never forget seeing Rebecca Bowman walking from the track to stabling on her beautiful chestnut horse that she had, and he was bridleless. And I remember being like, wow, she's on the racetrack with an OTTB and she's just casually walking it back to the barn. But I was so impressed, and I was like, wow, this is going to be so.
It was a really awesome cross-section of people that got chosen for it. There were all disciplines eventing. There was straight dressage. There was Western. Did they bring cows onto the racetrack? Or am I imagining that?
No.
Foxhounds. That's right. Yes.
And then they also did a vaulting
there was
demo.
Vaulting. So it was such a cool event to show off the true versatility of these horses and what they could do in such a short time.
Yeah.
Also, I remember, so I did my training ride that night, and I think I just was like, okay, she kept the lid on it. She's fine. Next morning, I went and did another training ride, and we jumped some jumps, and you actually got some pictures of me jumping that I have. Why do you look so surprised?
Because I had a camera malfunction when I was there, and I don't want to talk about it.
You got some of the warm-up. The photos come up in my Facebook memories every year, and I'm always like, wow, those are really cool to see the grandstand in the background be jumping a jump.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And she was just awesome. She was so cool. Just jumped the jumps, did the things she was supposed to do. We kept everything very organized. Did not want her to think that we're here to Yahoo around or anything like that. And she totally got it and totally rose to the challenge.
I think she was a good example of, there's definitely thoroughbreds that know when they're in the spotlight, if that makes sense. We've had a couple over the years that really had this look at me attitude, and she was like such a quintessential mare, and the fact that I think she knew she was quite special, and she loved being told how pretty she was and how beautiful
barn name
she
was Prima. Why do you think that was? Well, there was another reason, but
she was named after a beer.
Well, our
but
podcast is named after beer. There's common threads all the way through. She was named after a beer, but also because I'm terrible at naming things, but because she reminded me of a prima ballerina because she's so beautiful, athletic.
Yeah. She was very
feminine.
Very feminine. Yeah.
Still athletic and powerful.
So let's talk about how the showcase went.
So the night before there was a banquet, which was really cool. We got to meet everybody and hobnob and talk. I think that's the first time I met Jessica Redman. She was there.
Oh, yeah. That was the first time I met her, too.
And that's when they told us, oh, hey, great news. We've been able to line up microphone headsets and loudspeakers so you can all wear them. We're going to ask you all to wear them while you're riding so you can narrate the whole thing. And I was like, can I just go home now? Can I just pack up my shit and go home because I can't do this?
You were like, what am I going to say? I was like, I don't know, just talk about what you're doing.
I was in a sheer panic. I think they were expecting 1,000 people or something. But that was probably the initial fear. You think something's bad and then it just gets worse and worse. And then they're like, you're afraid of public speaking? Okay. Why don't you now get on this racetrack on a green thoroughbred in front of 1,000+ people and talk into a microphone while you're riding?
I would be more nervous about how out of breath
now I
would
would
sound.
Because I'm old.
It's shocking that we've even been able to get this podcast going because the two of us do not like talking in public.
No. At least we're past the point of having to put Post-it notes over each other's faces. But yeah, so I was terrified about that. I didn't know what I was going to say, and that made the nerves so much worse.
You're also just in general, I know it's tough when you know that we have this podcast and we've talked about ourselves and in some realm and depth, but you're not somebody who likes to really talk about your accomplishments or talk about yourself in a showy way at all. So I think that not that's what you're doing, but there is a performance aspect of it, and you having to highlight the things that you're good at. And I think that doesn't come naturally for you to do.
Fun fact, I have a video of my performance, which we will share. I have never been able to watch it with the sound on.
Oh my God. Let's have it.
I also have never been able to listen to this podcast. So there's that while I'm admitting things. Anyway, the performance I think went pretty darn well. We rode for like 10 minutes, did a flat work routine, did some jumping. I aimed to keep it pretty short and sweet. And the one thing that I hadn't gotten to school was, because I think it wasn't until the morning of, they brought in a couple of cross-country jumps. And I remember the one cross-country jump it didn't look as big from the side that the crowd could see it, but from the side you had to jump it from, it was very solid. And I think too, because the footing was so deep, it made it seem even bigger. And it was definitely bigger than any cross-country jump she had jumped thus far, doing a couple starter events.
Yeah.
But I decided we were going to jump it. So I was hopeful that we were going to jump it. So we ended up with jumping that jump, which was just like the icing on the cake because she jumped it.
Yeah. She jumped it
so well.
It was one of those jumps that is a roll top on one side and a bench on the other side. So you can be jumped in both directions, but they definitely can be posing to look at.
And she just ate it up. I just can't say nice enough things about that horse.
And then after you had completed the makeover, what was your plan?
So she was for sale. I did have her listed for sale. I don't know if they had like printed book or if we put flyers out or how that all worked. And I did not want to sell her. She had started to really remind me of my old horse, Alex, though he never did flat work nearly as well as she ever did. But she started to really brave jumping and gave me a really good feeling. But we finished the makeover. We ended up doing the unrecognized beginner novice at Plantation that November. And then we did the next spring, we went to Fair Hill and did the starter horse trials there. And then we did one more, St. Augustine, and ended up, she's one of those, I think, like I'd put her up for sale and take her off, and then I'd get some big bills and she'd go back up for sale. But I certainly wasn't going to sell her to just anybody. And then literally the perfect match came along. Our wonderful friends, Jenny and Karen, came up from Virginia. They were looking for a horse for Jenny and with her mom, Karen. And that was another adventure when she tried Prima, which I think we talked about a little bit in that other episode.
We did, yeah.
But yeah, she's been with them ever since. And that's 11 years, 10 years, something like that. So
yeah, she's loved within an inch of her life and wants for nothing and gets to go out fox hunting and show new people the ropes.
Yeah,
and
she's done some eventing. She's done a little bit of everything and gets to be pampered and loved on and definitely ended up with the best owners in the world.
Yeah. Hi, Jenny. Hi, Karen. I think that's a really nice way to end our story about Prima. I think when you are in the business of selling off-the-track thoroughbreds or horses in general, and I know that Jessica Redmond just alluded to this recently, there are horses that come through your barn that you really connect with, and there's nothing better than finding out that they're still with the person that bought them, and or that whatever they're doing in their new life, that they're just happy and loved as much as you love them. And I think why a lot of us stayed in the business for as long as we did.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give a little shout out here. Emily and I both attended the Fair Hill Thoroughbred Show and Real Rider Cup last weekend, which was held at the Fair Hill Showgrounds. It was a really cool opportunity for us to connect with a couple of our listeners and get some great content of just how versatile the thoroughbred can be. The Real Rider Cup is really cool because they select riders and teams that all of the money that they raise while they're prepping for it is given to different aftercare initiatives, including New Vocations and the Retired Racehorse Project. They started the Real Rider Cup in 2017, and since then they've raised $500,000 for aftercare initiatives. So it's a really cool program. And then Saturday and Sunday they had the Thoroughbred Show, which Saturday was hunters. So you had everything from model classes to lead line and under saddle pleasure classes, over fences. It was really cool to see the turnout and the sportsmanship there on that day. I was photographing the event for Fairhill, and hunter classes are really intense. I don't know how they're judged. It's really fascinating because all the horses I liked, I was like, why didn't that one win? I'm so confused. And then on Sunday, it was the jumper day, which was really fun to watch. You had everything from the 2-foot division on up to a mini pre by the end of the day. And there were some really notable riders from our area in those competitions with just some incredible athletes underneath them. And yeah, they had a stakes class, and it was just a great event overall. I posted some stuff on our social media from the event, and I hope everybody appreciates that. But we just wanted to say here that in a couple of weeks, we are going to be at the Maryland 5-Star. It's taking place on October 17th through 20th. So if you're traveling to the area or if you're from the area, please look for us at a tailgate spot. We're going to be in the middle hayfield. I'll find out our exact number soon. But that's in a really good middle part of the course. We're hoping to have a keg of Prima Pils beer from Victory Brewing Company there. And we're also planning on having a really fun scavenger hunt for fans of the podcast. So stop by and say hello, meet us in person, see how nerdy and weird we are in real life, and take part in our scavenger hunt. We're going to think of a really cool prize for this one. We'll be at the Maryland 5-Star. We're going to keep bugging you guys about this. And we're also getting close to announcing our Patreon tiers and the content that you're going to be able to hear with that. It's going to be a little bit of a transition from the content that you've been getting, because we're going to make 2 of our weekly podcasts available only on Patreon. We hope that you'll support us and follow us over there. And we are also going to get 2 regular episodes a month from us on the regular feed as well.
If you liked what you heard today, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow OTTB on Tap on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Also, please make sure to check out our website, www.ottbontap.com. Sign up for a newsletter to be the first to know about bonus content, upcoming episodes, and more. We love hearing from you.
Bye, guys.